Behold the fig. To the ancients they were the fruit of the gods, and today, the star of the fig Newton, its fruit and cake. And in medieval Europe they played center stage to a host of delicious dishes, including the one we're making today, a versatile fig and raisin puree known as rapé, or unfortunately, rapé, but we'll go with rapé. We'll also discuss the important role that this little fruit has played in world history. So please forgive me my shaggy quarantine hair and my complete lack of motivation to shave, and sit back, relax, and join me for the fig, this time on Tasting History. Now today's recipe comes from The Form of Curry, a collection of 14th century English recipes. It's easy to make, incredibly versatile, and comes with a glass of wine. So let's get started. What you'll need is 125 grams or 4 ounces of dried figs. Now you can use any fig. I'm using mission figs because that's what was available at the store, but really you can use anything. These are not period, but we'll just get over it. It's quarantine. So the first thing you'll want to do is remove the stems and soak them in a bowl of cool water for about 30 minutes while you gather the rest of your ingredients. Then open a bottle of red wine, nothing too dry, and pour out 275 milliliters or about 10 ounces for the rapé. And that should leave you plenty for a glass or two to sip while you're cooking. Then you also need 125 grams or 4 ounces of raisins. Next, the 14th century recipe calls for powder of pepper and other good powders. This just means spices. It's pretty vague. So take a good pinch of black pepper and then pretty much whatever else you want. It's cook's choice at this point. I used a half teaspoon of cinnamon, an 1/8 teaspoon of cloves, and an 1/8 teaspoon of dried orange peel. But you could add ginger or nutmeg or mace or pretty much whatever your little heart desires. Next you'll need 3 teaspoons of rice flour and a pinch of salt. Lastly, you'll want a half teaspoon of sandalwood powder. This ingredient is just there for coloring. It was a very popular way of coloring food in the Middle Ages, and it doesn't really affect the taste all that much. So don't feel like you have to use it. But if you are so inclined, then I have a link down in the description to that as well, to food grade powder, because you don't want the kind for makeup. It's not good. Now once your figs are soaked and you're a little sauced, go ahead and drain the figs and put them in a small pot and add the raisins. Then add the 275 milliliters of wine, your spices, and the sandalwood powder if you're going to use it. Now don't add the rice flour or the salt just yet, that'll come later. Then put the pot over medium-high heat and stir to combine. Once it's simmering, put the lid on the pot and continue to simmer for about 10 minutes or until the fruit is nice and soft. Now while that simmers, let's take a look at the resume of the star of our dish, Mr. Fig, or Ms. Fig, because they actually do have gender, which is kind of weird, but we're not going to get into that. So where did the fig get its start? Well, if the Bible has anything to say about it, and it usually does, it started at the beginning, in the Garden of Eden. Many scholars believe that the dangling fruit from the tree of knowledge was not an apple, but a fig. And that's why after eating it and realizing they were naked, Adam reached up and grabbed a fig leaf to cover his own dangling figs. Now while there's no evidence for the Garden of Eden figs, there is evidence of the Ficus carica, or common edible fig, being cultivated in northern Asia Minor, well, that was weird, between 5,000 and 11,000 years ago. And in 2006, near the ancient city of Jericho, a domesticated fig was found during an excavation of an 11,400-year-old house. That is really old. That's older than my mom. I'm sorry, Mom. I hope you don't watch this. Now, the first written mention of figs was found on a Sumerian tablet from 2500 BC. It talks about she'erku, or fig cakes, being given out at the temple, like fig Newtons for communion. Now, figs have always been associated with religion. The Egyptian goddess Hathor is said to have sprung from a fig tree to welcome the souls of pharaohs to the afterlife. And it was a fig tree, the Bodhi tree, that Siddhartha Gautama, or the Buddha, was said to have achieved enlightenment under. And it's rumored that the Prophet Muhammad said that if there's only one fruit in paradise, let it be a fig. That is quite an impressive resume, Mr. Fig. From Asia Minor, the fig spread west, across the Mediterranean, where it was thought to be a gift from the gods. They were given to ancient Greek Olympians as a prize for their physical prowess. And I think we should do that again. Instead of gold, silver, and bronze, you get figs, oranges, and kumquats. How about them apples? In Rome, Pliny the Elder claimed, "Figs are restorative, and the best food that can be taken by those who are brought low by long sickness." But perhaps my favorite story of the fig comes from Plutarch, who tells of Cato, the Roman senator, who declared, "Carthago delenda est," Carthage must be destroyed. Well, that fell on deaf ears, because the Senate thought that Carthage was too far away to pose any real threat. So crafty old Cato decided that it was time to use props. And one day, at a session of the Senate, he let some Libyan figs fall from his toga as he's readjusting. And the other senators were like, "Ooh, what lovely figs, so plump, so fresh." And Cato said, "Ha, I gotcha," because these figs were plucked only 3 days ago in Carthage. And if figs can get here in 3 days, so can the enemy. And that was what started the Third Punic War. True story. Now in the Middle Ages, dried figs were all the rage. They were cheap, they traveled well, they kept forever, and they were a good way to sweeten your food. On top of that, they were often prescribed as a laxative. Now while the dried fruit was pretty much everywhere in the known world by 800 or so, it wasn't until the 16th century that the tree itself made its way from Asia Minor to Asia Major. And by that I mean China, where it was cultivated around the Yangtze. Now if you think I had to travel really far to make that musical joke, and I did, it's nothing in comparison with how far Spanish missionaries were about to take the fig. Franciscan missionaries brought the fig across the Atlantic to Mexico in 1520, and they planted the first mission figs, not just a clever name, in sunny Southern California in 1768. And since that's where I live, that's why I decided to use the mission fig for my rapé, which should be about ready to take off the stove now. So go ahead and remove the pot from the heat, and without letting it cool too much, it is time to make the puree. Now you can either use a mortar and pestle, but that's going to take you forever and probably make a mess. But it is quarantine, so maybe you have the time, but I don't, or at least I don't want to, so I just used a blender. And you should too. At this point, you're going to add the corn flour and the salt and blend it again. Then return it to the pot and put it back on the stove at medium-low heat for about 5 minutes just to let it thicken up. Now, like I said, rapé is incredibly versatile. You can serve it warm over some roasted pork or lamb, be delicious I'm sure, or cold, just spread it onto a piece of bread, like a jam. I'm serving it as more of a dessert on top of some puff pastry with a little bit of whipped cream. All right, so let's try it. That's really good. It has, I mean, yes, kind of fig Newton-y, like the fig quality, but it's so much more spiced and complex, and you can taste the wine without any of the heat, though I think it'll go well with a glass of wine, and yes, I was correct about that. I also think, you know what? It would go really nicely over warm over some vanilla ice cream, and I think I'll do that tonight. Anyway, thank you so much for indulging me as I geeked out over the fig, and please hit that like button, subscribe, and join me next time on Tasting History.